and superhero-like NFL athlete having this experience. Gary, what do you think right off the top of your head?
Well, the thing is, the last 3 weeks, the NFL is, black mark on their whole everything. Wife beatings,
right?
DUIs, beating your children,
right?
So this is obviously
this is a great story, right?
Yeah, he's a defensive back. Yeah, at least there's something good coming out of the NFL. It's happening in other sports.
Yes,
we just don't hear
absolutely. That's what I wanted to say. So here's the thing that I think when I hear this story, and thanks for that, Gary, is that the headlines, if it bleeds, it leads, all that stuff. I went to journalism school. That's very, very true. A week or two ago, I went to every single sports blog and sports website that I found, and not a single headline had anything to do with sports, which was very disconcerting. But this kind of stuff, I think, is more often the case than you might think. I think people are doing good. NFL is a microcosm of the United States. There's always going to be some bad seeds and stuff. I personally think the NFL is under a great attack for lots of reasons, to be honest with you. I enjoyed that story. The other one I really, really liked a lot, and this one touched home to me because I go to a very, very cool church. People who serve each other, where the Bible is taught, and moreover, they serve their community. They are the hands and feet. Well, I came upon this church online, and after they received this windfall amount of money, $1.6 million to be exact. This is a small, very, very small church in Chicago. The elders get together, they mull over, what are we going to do with this money? And finally, what they decide to do, and this is fascinating, is they give every single member in their church a check for $500. 500 bones, here's your check, Sunday morning. You imagine this. And a little bit more of a faith experiment than a social experiment, because here's what they do. They tell them, take this money, go out and do good with it this week or this month. And I mean your creativity, your mind, your judgment, your talents. A little bit of a loaves and fishes kind of experience here, where we're taking a little bit of money and trying to turn it into a lot of good. So the church members immediately started thinking of ways. Immediately, the story reads, they started, talking to each other, ping-ponging ideas back and forth, needs, widows, schools, bands that need uniforms, go out, give a server a $500 tip. There's so many different things you can do with this amazing story. I find this stuff to be extremely uplifting. So in the mire and the muck, I bring you hope, and I want to encourage you with that. I mean, how awesome is that? And moreover, a great testament of true religion, which is to help the needy and the poor. 419-529-1400.
Fox News Radio, I'm Pat O'Neill. Authorities in Dallas are trying to find a homeless man who may have had contact with Ebola patient Thomas Duncan, who's now listed in critical condition. Texas Health Commissioner David Lackey calls the search precautionary.
No one has reported any symptoms, and we're happy about that, and we're reassured, but we're still very cautious to make sure we continue to care for individuals, monitor the situation the way it needs to be done.
The homeless man was among a group of about 50 who may have had contact with the patient. Protest leaders in Hong Kong say they're willing to speak to government officials to try and end a standoff in the streets, but the two sides still far apart.
The protesters want full democracy rather than China's plan to allow everybody to vote, but effectively vet which candidates they can support.
Fox's David Piper. Gone Girl is a hit at the box office. The thriller starring Ben Affleck pulling in $38 million over the weekend. Fox News. We report, you decide.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. My name is Brock Lawley. We're back. This is the Brock Lawley Show. By the way, I'm a musician. That song that you hear on the front end is mine. BrockLawleyMusic.com if you want to check that out. Actually just released a worship record. So if that interests you, BrockLawleyMusic.com. Also, I have a website where you can get all the links and the stories I'm going to talk about today. That's courageculture.net. And if you like the commentary, if you like what you're hearing, you can hear this every single day at iHeartRadio. I have an iHeartRadio channel. iHeartRadio is growing leaps and bounds. So check that out, the Brock Lawley Show, iHeartRadio. By the way, I guess it would have been, we're looking at 2 weeks ago now, I went up and played an event. It was a Meet Your Candidates, Meet Your Politicians is the better way to say it, event that the Republican women put on. And I met some great guys. I met some people that I hadn't met in person yet. I had talked to them on the radio here and there. And we have an election, ladies and gentlemen, November 4th, boots on the ground, determining the ideology that will govern your world, that will determine your property taxes, what kind of crazy, insane, Common Core nonsense your children are going to hear, etc. So Mark Romanchuk, you hear that guy a lot on the morning show with Rusty. Met him. Pat T-Berry. I love this guy. Brent Robinson. He's running for judge. Remember that name, by the way. I shook his hand. Craig Baldwin, Judith French. These people are all looking to garner your vote. I can only tell you this. I shook their hands, talked to them. I consider myself to be very impressed by them as people. It's important that you get out there and make your voice heard. It truly is. A lot of times that is mocked nowadays, but I truly believe that is important. It's a civil privilege. Ladies and gentlemen, you have heard this week that all of our economic problems have disappeared. And why? Well, I heard Barack Obama say that the economy is improved. Now, here's what you heard. You heard a 5.9% unemployment rate, just washed up on our shore magically with Peter Pan dust. Here's the truth. And I don't mean to take the wind out of the sails. I don't. But I like to live in the world as it is rather than the world as I wish it to be. I think that's what adults should do. The real facts about the job report are this. 315,000 more, not total, more Americans dropped out of the labor force. These guys dropped off into unemployment, welfare, food stamps, disability, etc. Some of them it was Social Security. It's like they're reaching 62 to 65, and they're sort of trying to hold on in that respect. We're broke, ladies and gentlemen. We're completely broke. So I don't really know as this baby boomer generation washes into that kind of category. I really don't have any idea how we're going to pay for this. I just have no I've done the math a million different times and it never works out. We have $18 trillion in debt now. So, adding to the labor force participation rate, it's dropped now to the lowest in 36 years. There's now 92.6 million working Americans not working. That is actually the truth. So in other words, when you do a math problem with the unemployment rate and you completely remove all the people who are not working, again, 92.6 million Americans not working, when you remove that from the entire situation, you come up with a 5.2 fairyland, fictitious, whitewashed tombs, Potemkin village number that the media then takes like a baton and trumpets. Total nonsense. And the reason that you don't feel a recovery is because, wait for it, there is no recovery, no economic recovery, ladies and gentlemen. And that is because free markets work. And when you social engineer an economy, when you have Keynesian economics, when you have puppeteers pulling this string, another problem is going to happen. Free markets, the debate was over, by the way. Socialism is a failed economic model, but we have clingers that just will not let that utopian vision go. By the way, I was struck by this, too, especially as one who served in the military in 2004 and 2005. Have you noticed a double standard on civilian casualties? In fact, I would bet you that you haven't heard anything about civilian casualties. But here's the truth. The United States of America is dropping sulfury hell from the sky in 3 countries now. And just a few months ago, the president was talking about the surgical glove of these drone strikes, because that was the only acceptable way to do it. Turns out that got thrown out, baby with the bathwater, with this new model here. Yes, we're raining down hellfire from the sky. And do you remember, too, this kind of bothered me a little bit. The New York Times and every other liberal megaphone was trumpeting civilian casualties every single day when Israel was locking horns with Hamas. You remember that. That was just in your rearview mirror. Well, all those casualties of war sentiment gone now. The administration gets a pass on this. I remember there were people in the streets in New York and in London, etc., very, very concerned with this moral question that we have to ask ourselves as free people. Is it right to just rain down napalm from the sky and just sort of let the fallout be the fallout? Well, apparently it is okay if the president has a D beside his name. And I don't know what other conclusion you can get. If you're Israel, that's not cool. And if you're a Republican, that's not cool. But in every other case, it's cacophony of crickets concerning civilian casualties. An irony that did not escape me. Colleges are a black hole mystery to my mind. Today's university of lower education. Well, I came upon this interesting story. So all of a sudden now you need affirmative consent forms filled out in colleges in California. By the way, this is black letter law. Before you can get physical with a member of the opposite sex in college. So pretty much you got to sign away some kind of legal form or whatever. That is on the heels of this huge push in the media and in colleges about these rape room style environments that we now find in our universities. That's what we're hearing all the time, that our universities and our young men are just sexual predators roaming like bandits. And by the way, the stats that are given is like 1 in 5 women have experienced this form of rape. By the way, if that stat is true, just to show you how inflated some of these things get, if that stat is true, 30 million American women have been raped, by the way. And if that stat is true, it's not at the continent of Africa that leads the world in in this kind of aggressive sexual behavior, but it's in the United States of America. So just to put that in context, because they throw these stats around all the time and they mean nothing. But that's what we're hearing. We're hearing that the college campuses are doused in this evil, sinister, sexual predator style mindset. And as a result of that, they're having all these new policy initiatives. By the way, the university is a weird place. Where all the other laws apply, the university exempt. For example, you can't carry a gun, even though you have a Second Amendment right. You can't carry a gun in the university. There's so many things that don't apply. But apparently the rule of law, innocence until proven guilty, doesn't apply either, because they have this new policy. It's called yes means yes. So in other words, if you're accused or if somebody hurls accusations, sexual assault accusations at you, the infrastructure and the administration and all these, they turn like the blob against you. And justice, Lady Justice takes off her veil and only sees through the lens of leftist politics. I want to elaborate on this, and I want to make some social commentary on it, because I find this to be par for the course with the way that we approach moral problems in our society. So in other words, if there really is this hotbed of sexual discombobulation and frustration and assault, etc., what are the actual reasons for it? Well, certainly they're not all this claptrap social engineering nonsense that we hear from the left, but there are some interesting questions we can ask ourselves if this is true, or if this even has a seed of truth in our universities. I think I'd like to elaborate on that. I'd like to talk about that a little bit. I'm going to do that as soon as we come back from this break. Remember, BrockLawleyMusic.com, CourageCulture.net, and if you want to hear more of this, iHeartRadio.com. 419-529-1400 Prairie Pro Tech Hotline. My name is Brock Lawley. I'll be right back. My name is Brock Lawley. We are back. And I set this up. I teed this up right before I left. I don't know how true this is, but I'm just taking their word for it that there is a seed of truth. There's this brewing sexual problem happening in our college campuses. And it's being framed that women are the victims and men are the predators. And this is just something that has to be addressed with legislation from the government, of course. And we just got to get out in front of this, because there's all this abuse and aggravated assault happening. Now, here's what I find to be amazing about the world I live in. So I have so many stories. I don't want to bore you with every one of them. But there's stories from universities throughout the country, and all of this legislation, the yes means yes legislation, the consult before sex legislation, you almost have to sign a little form before you kiss your girlfriend in college, etc., stuff like this. Well, this all happens, right? And they're really, really blowing the trumpet of warning about this. And it's the same ideology, the same universities, the same people, the same women's studies departments that have across the country, and it just started this week, Sex Week at the college universities, where you have ridiculous, filthy, and sinister seminars, where you deal with adult toys, where you have porn stars literally come into the classroom and put on shows, if you will, for the college students. By the way, you're mortgaging your house and sending your kids to these schools. I just want to remind you of that. Maybe you want to second thought that whole situation. But anyway, so we have Sex Week, where prophylactics are thrown about. College professors get to teach a new curriculum. Forget Shakespeare, forget the great artists, forget the great literature. What we need at universities is Sex Week. Now, is there an irony jumping out at you? Because as I read this, we're wondering why our campuses are turning into, and again, I reject this entire premise, but are turning into these sort of Saddam Hussein-style rape rooms, if you believe the hysteria of the left. And then at the same time, the ideology is promoting all these sex weeks in college campuses. Here's what I think is happening. When I read a story like that, we have people who are morally bankrupt, who have a moral compass that is totally smashed, that don't know up from down, right from left. They're just spinning in circles. Can't possibly tell me that grown adults cannot see the unbelievable irony in what I just said. Here is what I think adults should do. If we're finding that our college campuses are filling with young men who do not know how to treat women, if we're finding that relationships, physical relationships in our universities are reflecting things that horrify us, then the proper response is to ask ourselves, what is wrong with our culture? That this is the fruit that comes from its tree. Well, I'll tell you what's wrong with the culture. It's abandoned its foundation. It just feels things instead of thinks about things. You have to ask more